Morning, glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. I'm Hugh Hewitt. I have a Butler Beagle in the studio, so I may be a little bit slower today. When the Butler Beagles are allowed outside of Indiana, they simply drop in on friends and come to their studio. So Schroeder's around today. If I'm a little off my game, that's why. Let me do the rundown, because I'm still in a great mood. Youngkin's Virginia win offers midterm roadmap for GOP, warning for Democrats, opines the headline of the Wall Street Journal this morning. Voters punish Democrats and lift amid left drift, according to Axios. A couple of great quotes in this story this morning. Clearly, the president's drop in favorability made it very difficult for the Democratic nominee to stay above water. Democratic Jerry Connolly told Axios DC in McAuliffe's election night event in Tyson's Corner, Virginia. You think that's what happened? A senior aide to New Jersey Democrat told Axios' Alanya Trini, quote, "It's insanely clear. The party must reorient not on center-left or progressive goals, but on what gets real things done for families." You would think so. How bad was it? The New York Times has a headline story about a little tiny district in San Antonio. John Lujan, a 59-year-old retired firefighter, won the seat, a blow for Democrats, because Joe double-digit points only a year ago. My favorite headline of the morning in the New York Times from Jeremy Peters and Lisa Lerler: Republicans pounce on schools as a wedge issue to unite the party. As I put online, headlines are not the fault of Jeremy. He's a fine reporter. I don't know Lisa. Headlines are driven to get clicks. Republicans haven't pounced on anything. Republicans have been talking about schools in red and purple states for decades. Virginia's a blue state. And so the education issue has erupted in Virginia, proving that blue states can be turned red when parents see the indoctrination of their children going on. New York Democrats assess losses to Republicans, according to the New York Times. Quote, "This was a shellacking. Up and down the Empire State, Republicans won election at the local level. Reeling from surprise losses, Democrats sound the alarm for 2022, according to Jonathan Martin and Alexander Burns, the two Bigfoot Democratic reporters. Reporters on Democrats. I think they're leftists. I think they're both Democrats, but they're not. They're just reporters. So let me say that. Reeling from surprise losses, Democrats sound the alarm for 22, say reporters Jonathan Martin and Alexander Burns at the New York Times. Democrats stung by loss. Now get the note. Now I'm going to make a transition to a different set of stories. New York Times again. Democrats stung by losses press forward on Biden agenda. The Washington Post. After loss in Virginia, Democrats look to speed up their stalled $3 trillion spending agenda. So what two of those stories don't belong in everything I've told you about? I've run through a dozen stories. The two stories that say Nancy Pelosi marched right out there and said, we're going to double down on speed and size, we're going to add parental leave back in, and we're sending a bill to the Senate. Everything that went wrong in Virginia is because we didn't spend enough money. Can you believe it? That's what she's concluded. That's what Chuck Schumer concluded. We didn't go far enough to the left. So we're going to go left, left, left. So just remember, it's November the 4th, 2021. A massive shellacking has been delivered to Democrats across the country, and their instant reaction is to double and triple down on their left-leaning, wacky, progressive effort. And I must tell you, this is the kind of thing that makes people look up and believe the Democrats really don't have an agenda. All they really have is a plan for your life. They don't have an agenda to persuade you on. They have a plan for your life. A few other headlines. Glenn Youngkin, by the way, the governor-elect of Virginia, will be joining me at the bottom of the hour. I hope you will be here for that. Fed dials back bond purchases. Plans to end stimulus by June. Uh-oh. Millions of mortgage holders brace for Bank of England to raise interest rates. Uh-oh. That means, let's go check the markets. I'm going to do this early today, brought to you by Birch Gold. Birch Gold is a great sponsor of the program. Head to hughgold.com, hughgold.com. I want to go and see what happened to gold yesterday. Yep, 1775, up 0.66%. You see, when the Fed starts tapering and stops inflating the currency and printing money, that means interest rates are going to rise. And they're going to rise rather rapidly in England, and they're going to rise a little bit more slowly here. The 10-year Treasury's at 1.579. everything's going to get more expensive. By this time next year, the inflation that is below is about 5-7% is going to be in double digits. The houses are going to be out of reach, and gold, look, I'm not a prophet nor the son of a prophet, but it's not going to be around $17.75 an ounce. Yesterday's market was another big one. The Dow up 104, the NASDAQ up 161. So what does Birch Gold have to do with that? We're on to an inflationary sprint and then a deflationary headache that will be extraordinary. A stagflation, 2022 wipeout for the Democrats because they're not going to stop spending money. It's all they know how to do. In other news, so that's my Birch Gold news for you. Get out there and take care of business now and get the gold that you need, or roll over a portion of your IRA into a Birch Gold 401k operated and maintained, or IRA. They house the gold, they take care of it. You can just buy gold for them for your safety deposit box. Inflation is interest rates is coming. Other news. The Supreme Court heard arguments on scrapping New York State's concealed weapons permit law. My friend, retired federal judge Mike Luttig, a conservative, counseled against the court striking it down in a New York Times op-ed a couple days ago, which I've read a few times. The Second Amendment is not my specialty. I'm not a gun guy. I do know it's an individual right, and it was so declared by the Supreme Court in Heller and subsequently applied to the states through incorporation. But we don't know what standard, whether it's rational basis, meaning whatever they pass is fine, intermediate scrutiny, which means they've got to have a compelling reason for doing it, or strict scrutiny, meaning that all gun laws are down. I think they're going to settle on intermediate scrutiny, and I believe they're going to strike down this law, but indicate that reasonable concealed carry weapon law will meet strict scrutiny. But I don't know, and it's not my area of specialty. I get Harsanyi on or someone like that. COVID updates. This is really going to encourage you. Biden urges vaccinations for millions of newly eligible children. Can you think of a worse spokesperson for getting children vaccinated than the President of the United States, who falls asleep at the COP 23, whatever it is? Really? It's an honest question. Can you think of someone less persuasive to put in front of the nation to urge them to get their children 5 to 11 vaccinated? Now, I personally believe every child between 5 and 11 should get vaccinated, unless they've already had the virus. I don't know what to tell you there. That's the one question I've asked. I've invited Dr. Fauci and Dr. Collins on the show. They won't come on because I'm not an easy interview and I won't blow smoke at them. And the one question that Americans want to know is, my kid had COVID. When did they get the vaccine? Have you seen a clean answer to that anywhere? No, of course not. That would require the government to communicate. Some parents rush to get COVID-19 vaccines for young kids, writes the Wall Street Journal. Of course you would. If they haven't had COVID, you would go and do that. Young children, according to the New York Times, are lining up for the next wave of COVID shots. That makes a lot of sense. Once they get them, I think they can take their masks off and be very, very happy with the world. Cheers, tears, comfort dogs, and Disney balloons. COVID shots for children get underway in a Texas hospital. Spare me. Every child ever has shed a tear at the little punch. There's nothing to worry about. President Biden also popped up yesterday to say that families separated at the border won't receive $450,000. He also said it to the Wall Street Journal. Biden says payments to family separated at the Mexico border are not going to happen. He's actually not in a position to say that directly. Those payments are contemplated as a result of discussions between the Department of Justice and the ACLU. It's a proposal that the United States government put on the table so he can call up Merrick Garland, and Merrick Garland can tell the Department of Justice lawyers, take that off the table. We're going to court, but he's got to ask. This is the most interesting story of the day, by far. Marines will overhaul recruiting retention and shift away from a young, replaceable force, the commandant said. The Marine Corps released a new plan Wednesday that says it must overhaul how it recruits and retain Marines, suggesting for the first time in decades that threats posed by China and other adversaries require personnel changes and could require some shrinking of the service to accommodate a new emphasis on keeping trained personnel. That's like heresy among Marines. General David Berger, Commandant of the Marine Corps, said that he sees no alternative but to pivot away from the system that through multiple wars has prioritized massing a young, physically tough, replaceable force that was not all that highly skilled. For the past 35 years, Berger said the services had turned over about 75% of its force each year, rotating annually among thousands of young enlisted Marines who joined for 4 years while other services retain a higher percentage. We are an anomaly. We brag about it, and I think it's worked for us. It will not work for us going forward, I don't think. The Marines are going to go for long-time tenured people. That's interesting. I got to talk to some Marines about that. Not sure what they're going to think. I got to call Botkin, my financial advisor up in Sacramento, and find out what he thinks about that. Marines generally, it's in the Washington Post. I'll be right back here when we come back. America, stay tuned. Welcome back, America. Hugh Hewitt live inside the Beltway. So pleased to welcome the governor-elect of Virginia. Good morning to you, and great to have you with us, Governor-elect Youngkin. I have not had a chance to say that yet. I wanted to make sure I said it right. Good morning.
Good morning, Hugh. Thank you for having me, and it's just been great to be with you through this whole campaign, but it's especially great to be with you this morning, so thanks for having me.
I hope you got some sleep. I've got a number of questions. None of them are trick questions. I just sort of want to get your thoughts as they exist right now. Have you named a transition director yet, Governor-elect Youngkin?
Yeah, we have. Longtime campaign Chief Operating Officer Jeff Getman. We're working on transition. We were in the office yesterday working on it, so we got started on within a few hours of having that great crowd with us at our announcement, and we're already moving. And there's a lot to do, Hugh. We've got to get ready, and we have a big agenda for day one, and so we're getting to work.
Now, I don't expect answers until you take office. I kind of hope you do the FDR thing, which is to stay away from the mess in Richmond until you actually have the authority to fix it. But you'll be doing planning, et cetera. Will you read through, or have someone like the former Attorney General now in private practice, Richard Cullen, read through the state constitution, the code, and really tell you what your powers and authorities are as governor?
Yeah, we of course we've been through that a bit over the course of the last 10 months, and we're really looking forward to working with our majority in the House of Delegates, which there's still some races that I think have a little bit of counting to do, but sure looks like we've got a good majority in the House of Delegates. That was awesome, and we had victory declared there, and I think we're going to have a really constructive path forward. I spoke to a lot of leaders from the Democrat leadership yesterday in both the Senate and the current leadership in the House of Delegates, and we're just going to have a constructive path forward. I mean, the kitchen table issues that were at the heart of this election process of low taxes and education, of course, and better jobs and safe communities, these are issues that everybody can rally around. And so we're going to pull together, I think, a very strong agenda, which everybody has heard about over this campaign, and get moving on day one.
Has Mrs. Youngkin given any thought to what she wants to get done as First Lady of Virginia? I'm curious if she has a transition in mind.
She does, and she was starting to work on that yesterday, too, as she was down in the transition office with us. And I think she's got a lot of things that really mean a lot to her. One of the things she and I both are quite passionate about is really taking on human trafficking, and it's been an issue. It was our very first policy issue that we laid out in this campaign, and but I think there's a lot of really important issues that she's going to focus on. We've got a meeting today with the current governor Northam and his wife, and I'm looking forward to that because he's really committed to help us transition in a very seamless way. And so this is getting started, and time to go to work, and I'm really looking forward to it, Hugh. It's going to be an exciting 4 years.
Now, Governor-elect Youngkin, do your kids have to change schools? I always wonder about the very human element of this sort of stuff. Are they old enough that they don't have to, or do you have to do that?
No, we have our fourth child, who's our third son, Thomas, is in high school, but he's a junior, and so we're of course going to let him finish where he is, and he's excited about that. And our other two are in college, and then of course our oldest one, Grant's graduated and is doing life. So we're in great shape from a kid standpoint. It'll require us to move back and forth a bit, but we already started to think about how that's all going to work, and we're just going to ask for God's grace to help us get it all done.
Are you going to do a Carlyle Group talent dip? I mean, you know a lot of the smartest people in the United States. They work for Carlyle. Are you going to go in there and grab a few people and bring them down to Richmond?
Well, I don't know exactly where they're going to come from, but I will tell you this. We're going to have the very best people. And one of the things that I'm excited about is just the amazing talent that has already reached out and said we're excited about being part of this next administration in Virginia, and focusing on things that are really going to make a difference in Virginia's future and Virginians' lives. And so I think we're going to have an enormous well of talent to choose from. It's already started to show up. and that's really exciting.
You know, the superintendent of schools, James Lane, has been there since June 1 of 2018. Do you get to name a new superintendent?
I do, and I've committed that by early December I'll name a new Secretary of Education and a new superintendent, and we're already starting that process to find the very best people to do that. And we've got a big agenda in education. I think one of the things that was clear in this campaign is that education is at the forefront of voters' minds, and it wasn't a Republican versus Democrat issue. It was a universally uniting issue for parents. And so, we've got a big charter school initiative to put forth. We want to make sure our curriculum is really at a very high standard. We're going to raise expectations in our schools. We're going to have a record budget for our Department of Education to put to work to raise teacher salaries. And so we've got to have just a world-class all-star team, and we're already starting that process trying to find those folks.
You know, when Bill Lee went in Tennessee, he asked Larry Oren, the president of Hillsdale College, to sit down with him on charter schools, and they did, and they got a good program. I am curious if you'll go outside of the box. Now, I haven't talked to Arthur about this, but I threw it out on Twitter. I hope Glenn Youngkin picks Arthur Brooks, who's now a professor at Harvard Business School and the Kennedy School of Government, formerly ran AEI, asks him to come and serve as his Secretary of Education. Will you go outside of the box as opposed to getting an educrat? And God bless educrats, but they're not really innovation-driven, Glenn Youngkin.
Well, Hugh, I'm an outsider in this. I came in with a very fresh perspective, and we're going to do things that are going to make a difference. And I expect to have an extremely talented cabinet around me. And yeah, we're going to be outside the box in a lot of these choices. And that gives we have time to make sure we're assessing all of the talent that's available. But we're not going to do things the way that they have been done, and that's I think that's one of the great privileges of stepping in as an outsider is you get to think outside the box.
Now, I've got to play for you very quickly, Governor, two quotes by my friend, and she is my friend, Yamiche Alcindor, at the Biden press conference yesterday. I just want her question so you get how your election is being framed in the national media. Cut number 8, the beginning, Ben, please. Can you play that for the governor?
What should Democrats possibly do differently to avoid similar losses in November, especially as Republicans are now successfully running on culture war issues and false claims about critical race theory?
Okay, stop right there, then play cut number 9, her follow-up.
What's your message, though, for Democratic voters, especially black voters, who see Republicans running on race, education, lying about critical race theory, and they're worried that Democrats don't have an effective
Okay, stop right there. So false claims and lying. She's talking about you, Governor-elect. I don't believe you made any false claims. I don't believe Yamiche knows what happens at Thomas Jefferson High School in Loudoun County or throughout the state. I don't believe she's read what Christopher Rufo has discovered about what Terry McAuliffe directed his Department of Education to do on critical race studies 8 years ago. But that is Yamiche is standing in for every other member of the left-leaning, completely co-opted part of the media that blocks and tackles for Democrats. What do you say in response to that?
Well, Hugh, losing is hard. I know. Okay, and this is what you would expect. I mean, we united people around education, and it was not a divisive party issue on our side. We brought people together from all walks of the political spectrum. Democrats, Republicans, independents, and we saw support across every minority group, and it was around education for our children. I mean, children are not a divisive issue. Children are the future, and the fact is that what we expressed on our campaign was a real agenda to get politics out of the classroom and work on educating children to be ready for life, college ready or career ready, with a curriculum that actually allows them to excel and run as fast as they can. And of course, there's always children that need some extra help, and investing in our special ed program in Virginia, because kids with disabilities in Virginia have really, really been challenged during this time period. So ours was a very practical, comprehensive approach, and I understand that there's a lot of folks in the left liberal side of the Democratic Party that look at this and want to try to see it through a completely different lens. It's just not true. And I know losing's hard for folks, and they're going to make excuses, but at the end of the day, we're pressing forward with an agenda that's going to unite folks around a great education in Virginia. We will have the best schools again, and I just look so forward to preparing Virginia's kids for a great life.
What worries me, though, Governor-elect, is that Yamiche isn't the Democrats. She's the media, and she's PBS. We pay for Yamiche, and people like her who are presenting what you did as a lie and as a false claim. CRT, which is a subset of CT, and I've been studying CT. You didn't have to go to law school. God bless you. I did since 1978. It's racism. Their central theory is that racism and disparate racial outcomes are the result of complex, changing, and often subtle and social and institutional dynamics rather than explicit and intentional prejudice of individuals. In other words, systemic racism. And the media's embraced it, and they believe it, and it's contrary to our 14th Amendment. It's contrary to Brown v. Board. How do you fight that? If it's in the water, if everyone thinks everybody's a racist, how do you fight that?
Well, I think first, we actually appeal to the better side of ourselves. And I found myself during this campaign really drawn to those immortal words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., where we are called to judge one another based on the content of our character and not the color of our skin. And I think we have to keep talking about it. We have to keep talking about it, what it means to actually focus on character and not focus on race. And let's be clear. Of course, racism exists. It always has, and it always will. We have to try to root it out when we see elements of it. But at the end of the day, we're called to love one another, and we have to try to live our lives that way. And the moment that we throw in the towel and concede that we have to all of a sudden start teaching our children to view everything through a lens of race, we've all of a sudden lost. And I just think we're better than that. I think Virginians are better than that. I think there are shared values that everyone can in fact pull together and embrace, that we're going to focus on our children's future and helping them in fact get ready and just just reject this whole concept that we have to teach everyone that race is at the base of everything we do.
Now, I know you are a Christian. You don't wear it on your sleeve, and I appreciate that. I'm a Christian. I don't wear it on my sleeve, but I'm very easy about it. Racism is a sin. We don't believe in it. We reject it. But I am amazed at the Beltway's embrace of a false narrative. Maybe Christopher Rufo may have helped lead them that way. Are you acquainted with his work from the Manhattan Institute, Governor-elect Youngkin, Chris Rufo?
I haven't, Hugh.
Okay. He is basically used... It's okay. You'll catch up with him eventually. He's the one that found the 2015 Department of Education directive. McAuliffe was governor then, telling the Virginia public schools to embrace critical race theory in order to re-engineer attitudes and belief systems. So it's in the water. Are you familiar with the Thomas Jefferson High School admissions controversy?
Of course I am, and I think one of the things that we felt strongly about is that our governor's schools in Virginia should in fact be meritocracies, and they should embrace the idea that there will be assessments and testing in order to be admitted. And on top of that, where there's groups of students that feel like they need extra support in order to get ready for that, then we should find ways to provide that extra support. But
there's a state
in all cases, we in fact have to allow our children to soar to the highest heights. And then those that need extra support, we find ways to provide it.
And by the way, I applaud your emphasis on special ed. I know so many parents who've struggled through the last 18 months, and they need a lot of help. And I did not hear you give a speech without mentioning that. Kudos on that. The State Board of Education has 9 members, Governor-elect Youngkin. Some of them are set to run in terms through 2025. Can you fire them all, or do you have to wait for them to be termed out and start slowly to replace? You don't even get a replacement under their terms until June of next year.
Yeah, so we actually will have rolling appointments. That's just the way that the Virginia appointment schedule works with the Board of Education, and we'll be making those rolling appointments. And we've already got lots of people who put their hands up to be part of that. So as I said earlier, I think we're going to have a real deep well of capability and leadership on our Board of Education over time, and I do believe that we're going to end up with a curriculum and an approach towards education that really will allow Virginia's kids to soar.
3 more questions, Governor-elect Youngkin. Thanks for the time this morning. I appreciate it. I know you're probably exhausted. Universities in the state, whether it's the university, whether it's William and Mary, whether it's George Mason, James Madison, they are fundamentally unbalanced. The left has marched through them. How does a governor get these state-funded institutions under the control of non-ideological players? Should the hiring of faculty be taken away from faculty and given to people who are fair?
Well, let me start. Virginia's college system is ranked in the tops of the country. It's very, very good. And I'm incredibly encouraged by the quality of education that that kids who come to college in Virginia. I think that over time we need to make sure that again our universities are providing an education that's balanced, that we have freedom of speech that is fully embraced on our university campuses, and that we don't have a cancel culture on our university campuses. And it's a real challenge, I think, on many campuses today. I will say we saw it during the election a bit, and I think that's one of the things we have to really, really focus on. I also think that we've got a great opportunity with our historically black colleges and universities. I pledged to include funding for our HBCUs in my first budget, and I will do that for every budget that comes thereafter. And so, Virginia's universities are some of the most respected in the world. We're going to continue to make sure that they stand for the ideals that we all embrace, and having our First Amendment right fully expressed on our university campuses is really important to me.
Now, there's a new campus springing up in Alexandria, Amazon HQ2, and a new campus of Virginia Tech. Are you going to have a special representative for what is going to be the new Silicon Valley? The East Coast Silicon Valley is in your state.
Yeah, I believe that innovation has to be at the heart of my next administration. Virginia has not, over the course of the last few years, been a great place to start a business. We're ranked 49th in the nation as best place to start a business. And so we will, in fact, have a big focus on innovation. And I'm looking forward to tapping into the great talent that exists. What's happening in Northern Virginia, particularly around Amazon HQ2, is really exciting with the Virginia Tech Innovation Campus. But we have to have innovation spread across the Commonwealth. And there's a great opportunity with accelerators and incubators to actually grow around all of our great universities. And I've been very excited to watch the corporate partnering that's gone on, particularly between Hampton Roads and Richmond.
That is great.
As they embark on a new innovation corridor that would extend down I-64. So this is a great opportunity for us to really unleash Virginia innovation, and this is something that's really exciting for me because, of course, when it comes to starting business and creating jobs, having a thriving entrepreneurial culture is really important.
Last question, and short one. We got 15 seconds, Governor. Who's going to help you pick judges?
Governor doesn't do that in Virginia, and so that's left to our legislature, and so as the legislature sorts out its leadership, because one of the things they're going to have to do is get all those committee assignments set as Republicans will take back the majority in our House of Delegates. And, of course, the Senate will stay with the Democrats in control, but it's a 21-19 ratio in our Senate. We're going to work constructively together. And as I said, I started out my day yesterday speaking with leadership from both the Senate and the House that have been good leaders for the Democrats. And I'm looking forward to an incredibly constructive working arrangement. And we're going to get a lot done. Glenn
Youngkin, it's great to talk to you, Governor-elect, and I look forward to talking to you early and often. Congratulations on a victory heard around the country.
Thank you so much, Hugh, and you have a great day. And again, I appreciate always you making time for me on your show, and I look forward to continuing it.
Anytime, Governor-elect, Governor Glenn Youngkin. It's great to have you. Be well. I'm switching from Governor Youngkin to Michael Oren. He's in Israel. We had an election here, Michael Oren. We got a brand new governor. I don't know when you lived in Washington, if you ever lived in Virginia, or if you stayed in the district. Michael, are you there?
I'm there.
We're not hearing you very well. Yes.
Hello?
Hello, I can hear you barely. Are you on a speaker or something?
I just lost you. I can't. Don't go anywhere. Hold it.
I won't go anywhere. When we make one
of these. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Can you hear me now?
Strange. Okay, we'll try this. Are you ready?
Yes, I'm still here, Michael.
I'm here. Okay.
Okay.
We're not hooking up here.
All right. Michael Oren.
Virginia, no, I spent a lot of time in Virginia, though.
And so in Israel, who runs the education system? When it's woke and it's broke, who has to fix it?
The state. We don't, the founding fathers of the United States, God bless them, were so afraid of tyranny, right? The King of England, that they distributed power. So, during Corona, the governor of New York couldn't tell the mayor of New York City to open up the schools. And the president of the United States couldn't tell the governor of New York to open schools. We have one minister of education who is responsible to one government, and they tell what goes on in the schools.
Well, how do you make of that system? That seems very anti-distribution of power and very centralized.
Yep, it is. Yep, it is. And it's, again, it's those founding fathers. It's Madison and Jefferson and Hamilton and Jay, who, their experience was with the King of England, and they just wanted to distribute power and make sure that nobody could get a monopoly over it. But most states aren't like that. America's very unique in that way.
Yeah, I just got the new Andrew
the,
Roberts biography of George III called The Last King of America. I can't wait to read it. But in the new Israeli government, you get a minister of education then, and that individual, they decide curriculum, they decide critical race theory, they decide all that?
Yes, but there are different schools here also. We have different types of education. You have a religious system, you have a secular system, you have an Arab system. But usually, yes, it's coordinated and has to be approved by the education ministry.
All right, I want to go to a Times of Israel headline this morning. Iran, EU say nuclear talks to resume on November 29 in Vienna. I don't think Joe Biden is going to be stopped any way, shape, or form. He's going to get back into a JCPOA, and Israel's going to have to act. Is that your realism as well?
It has to be our sort of default position, and we have to be prepared for it. I don't want to influence the editors of the Wall Street Journal, but I put in an op-ed yesterday that explains something that I've talked about on your show several times, why Israel cannot coexist with a threshold capacity Iran, whereas the United States maybe can, or think it can. And that's, it's a very technical issue, but threshold basically means the ability to make a bomb very, very quickly. So the Biden administration says, well, Iran's not going to get a bomb on our watch. Well, it's not going to get a bomb, but it could get the ability to get a bomb. And for us, that's a totally insufferable position, because every time you go to war against Hezbollah or Hamas or any of these other proxies of Iran, we're going to have an Iranian threshold capacity gun to our forehead. And it will greatly, greatly impair our ability to defend ourselves against terror.
So, Michael Oren, this is not a quick answer, but I want to get it started. The second order impact of an Israeli strike on Iran, does that mean a long, enduring war between Israel and its allies in the Middle East, which would include the UAE and Saudi Arabia quietly or not so quietly, Jordan? Would that go on a long time?
Not if you do it right, to tell you the truth. I mean, I've been a long opponent of Israel's longstanding policy of retaliating against these Iranian proxies like Hezbollah and then paying a price for it because we get branded war criminals, whereas we should be hitting what the Saudis call the head of the snake. And every time a rocket comes up for Hezbollah, we shouldn't be hitting Lebanon. We should be blowing up an oil refinery in the Gulf, an Iranian refinery. And I just think that if we bring the war to Iran and don't let them use the proxies to bleed us, then I think the war can end much more quickly.
Do you believe that Naftali agrees with you, the Prime Minister and your current Defense Minister, and would your allies join you?
I hope so. I hope that the Prime Minister understands this. And I think our allies will do as much as humanly possible they can. At the end of the day, Israel has to defend itself by itself, and we have the ability, we have the right, and any assistance we can get, we'll take, but we can't count on it. Again, it's a default position, and I think that we can defend ourselves.
And we got 30 seconds, Michael Oren. Do you expect this to kick off anytime in the next 6 months?
We have to be prepared for it. And I've written repeatedly that I don't think Iran will wait a long time. And Iran now is very quickly approaching that threshold capacity, which is intolerable for the state of Israel.
I agree with you. And I just don't think Tony Blinken and Joe Biden and Jake Sullivan have any idea how close we are to that. Michael Oren from Israel, thank you for joining me on Coming Back America, hour number 2. Your reactions to Governor Glenn Youngkin. I'll play the part you didn't hear. 1-800-520-1234 connects you to the Thursday edition of the Hugh Hewitt Show. Welcome back, America. Hugh Hewitt Inside the Beltway Live. I hope you're watching on the Salem News Channel. Download it from Google or iTunes and just watch along. Senator Jim Talent, formerly senator from the great state of Missouri, now with the Bipartisan Policy Center, joins me. He's seen a lot of elections in his years. Jim Talent, what did you make of Tuesday night?
Well, the voters didn't like the policies. They didn't like the effect of the policies. They didn't like the way the policies were being marketed. and they didn't much like the people marketing them. Other than that, everything was fine for the president and the Democrats, right? I mean, it was just, and you saw it coming. We all saw it coming. And I think the comments you've been making about the press are so insightful. And let me say for this reason, okay? If every interview that you do in public life, you're doing with complete friendlies who are throwing you softballs, you lose the edge. You slip into saying stupid things because you know you're never going to get contested. And I think this is really hurting the Democratic end. I mean, when McAuliffe, what would possibly cause a person in a debate to say that parents shouldn't be involved in the education of their kids?
Not having talked to me once. Not having heard from one Republican, one center-right reporter once about how education matters.
Exactly. McAuliffe is a smart guy. I mean, what would cause a president to look in a camera and say, I'm losing patience with any segment of the American electorate? When I saw that, and forget about the reason, forget about, right or wrong on the policy, you just don't do that sort of thing. And
Senator, I got to play for you in the audience that hadn't heard it. Yamiche Alcindor, colleague of mine. I know her. She's a nice person. Here are her two questions to Joe Biden yesterday. The answers don't matter. It's the question. Cut number 8.
What should Democrats possibly do differently to avoid similar losses in November, especially as Republicans are now successfully running on culture war issues and false claims about critical race theory?
Okay, false claims about critical race theory, number 1. Cut number 9, Yamiche talking to the president.
What's your message, though, for Democratic voters, especially black voters, who see Republicans running on race, education, lying about critical race theory, and they're worried that Democrats don't have enough...
Okay, lying about critical race theory. Yamiche has made 2 statements of alleged fact to the President of the United States on national TV. She's the host of Washington Week in Review. She's a PBS NewsHour regular. What do you do about that, Jim Talent?
See, and the thing is, you're not doing any favors. You, for example, will put the hard questions to people, particularly office holders, and you do it in a very intelligent way. And everybody knows that. So when they're going on your show and they're going to be asked about a particular subject, they sit with the staff and say, okay, what are the hardest questions we could get asked, right? And that's really good because it forces you to up your game in the way you communicate. But if you don't think that's ever going to happen, you start getting really sloppy. And it's one of the reasons that, an adversarial press, you could, as a politician, you don't like it, obviously, sometimes. But in the longer run, it's really good for you and your agenda and your ability to communicate effectively with people.
And Jim, I want to take this up to the next level. The crisis of credibility in this country. Nobody believes the big media, and nobody believes Tony Fauci, and nobody believes Chuck Schumer or Nancy Pelosi or Joe Biden. Nobody believed Donald Trump on the other side. We no longer have sort of a common ground of truth.
Yeah, it's the loss in credibility of political institutions, but also cultural and social institutions as the people, because the people who run, people don't trust these institutions because they are not, in fact, trustworthy. And they underestimate voters. They underestimate people. People learn about the things that affect them. So all these parents in Virginia, they learned about what's going on in the schools because it affects their kids. Okay, now sure, they can't name most of them, the provinces in Afghanistan, but they learn about things that affect them, whether it's education or health care, or inflation, or the shelves are empty, or who's coming over the border.
My favorite example, Jim. Everybody knows Thomas Jefferson High School. It's the Stuyvesant High School of Northern Virginia. It's always been merit-based selection. It's no longer. The head of their PTA resigned because of equity issues and changes in admissions policy. Everybody knows about it, and the media doesn't discuss it. They say there's no CRT. It's maddening because people know they're being lied to.
That's right. And this is spreading out. What you saw in Virginia this is not just, core sort of politically involved conservatives who are, reading and watching their own particular, section of the media. But it's spreading out everywhere. I mean, we see this in Missouri. I talk to people. I try and read a pretty wide variety of things, and I have a lot of different friends. Now, to be fair, I'm not an officer. I'm not as busy as I was. So, look, you're right, and I think it's an extremely important observation.
Jim Tellin of the Bipartisan Policy Center. I hope you get the Bipartisan Policy Center to try and reclaim the news business, because it's now just an arm of the Democratic Party, and it is being regarded as such. That's why people need to download the Salem News Channel. I'll be right back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt, live inside the Beltway. The news you need, the analysis you want on the next hour of the Hugh Hewitt Show. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. On Monday, the Supreme Court heard a case about a Texas law concerning abortion. And in December, they're going to hear arguments in Dobbins. I believe that is going to be the occasion for the reversal of Roe v. Wade and Casey v. Planned Parenthood. And I've just written about that for the National Review special issue that is coming out. I'm joined by Valerie Huber, one of the leaders of the pro-life movement in the United States. She is the head of the Institute for Women's Health. She served in the Trump HHS, was one of the leading forces behind the Geneva Consensus Declaration. Valerie, welcome and good morning to you. Thank you for joining me on the Hugh Hewitt Show live this morning.
Well, good morning, Hugh. It's great to be here.
Valerie, would you first tell us about the Institute for Women's Health?
Sure. So the Institute for Women's Health really exists to clear the path so that genuine gains can be made for women's health, particularly in the developing world. What we found is that too many extraneous things like the debate over abortion prevents women from getting the real health care they need. As you know, the women's health narrative has been overtaken by the abortion debate, and we think that shouldn't be so.
Well, that is a great effort to spearhead, and I compliment you on the Institute for Women's Health. What's the website for it, Valerie?
It is theiwh.org.
theiwh.org. Now, I was amazed to find out that there was such a thing called the Geneva Consensus Declaration. I was amazed because I know Alex Azar, I know a bunch of people at HHS, I know Secretary of State Pompeo, I know Ambassador O'Brien, and I didn't know about the Geneva Consensus Declaration. So would you assume our audience is as ignorant as I was until last week and tell us what that was and why it matters?
Well, it does matter, and I'm not surprised if many in your audience are not familiar with it, because it's something that the United States coordinated and was a part of that's outside of the borders of the United States, but it has very real implications for the United States. When I started negotiating on behalf of the U.S. for women's health issues, I found not only that abortion was being brought into these debates in a wrongful manner, but I also saw that nations were being pressured, threatened, and intimidated either into silence or into changing their own laws on these issues by UN agencies or by progressive nations, and that, in fact, the U.S. government had been complicit in this very sort of behavior in the past, and I fear that it could be happening under the current administration as well. Well, I realized that whether we had 4 years or 8 years, eventually the Trump administration would be gone, and we wanted to have more than just a finger in the ocean that when we left, we wouldn't even know we made any head gains here. And so creating a coalition of nations that supported the family, supported women's health, and supported life, acknowledging that there was no international right to abortion, seemed like an important thing that I was shocked to learn had never been done before. There had never been a coalition of this sort.
Oops, we've lost you there, Valerie. I think maybe your internet dropped. Let's try again. There had never been a coalition of this sort. Then what happened?
So there'd never been a coalition of this sort. I was very surprised that that was the case. So we reached out to countries that could lead the coalition in every region of the world. We negotiated a document called the Geneva Consensus Declaration that made it very clear that women's health needed to be a priority, that extraneous issues should be taken out of that debate, and and policies over the protection of life and the family needed to be made by countries, not by international organizations, not by other countries poking its business into the affairs of that nation. It's really a national sovereignty issue surrounding the support of life and family.
Now, there are a number of nations like Poland with its Catholic past that are very pro-life, and there are a number of nations like the United States in places like California and New York where abortion on demand is the policy. What is the international consensus on abortion? Is there one?
There is no international consensus on abortion. So those who are promoting abortion as if it were a human right are creating a narrative as if there is consensus when in fact there isn't. And that's really one of the points of this Geneva Consensus Declaration, and that's to permit countries to make their own laws on this and not to have the jurisprudence internationally or the policies or the advocacy groups internationally force them to change things that are actually contrary not only to their laws, but to who they define themselves as nations based on their cultural and religious foundations.
So the Geneva Consensus Declaration reserves to states the right to make reproductive policy as a sovereign and rejects any attempts to internationalize it. Have I articulated that correctly?
You did a very good job of doing so, yes.
Okay, who signed it and when was it signed, and did the United States sign it?
So the United States did sign it on October 22nd, 2020. At that time, we had 32 countries sign on, representing every region of the world, more than 1.6 billion people. And then before we left the administration, we increased that number to 35 countries. There has only
So, Valerie Huber, that's huge.
Yeah.
That would actually be significant in international law textbooks. That would be something that the Supreme Court might, in fact, consult in the Dobbins case as evidence that there is no natural right to abortion. I mean, there is that argument out there, and I think it's a bad argument, but one of the things that people point to are international regimes that declare abortion to be a human right. Has the United States withdrawn now, given that we have a hard-left pro-abortion absolutism administration in place? Did they immediately tear it up?
Yeah, what was really disappointing to me is that before the sun set on Inauguration Day, all existence of the Geneva Consensus Declaration on U.S. government websites were removed. And what was really surprising about that, Hugh, is a lot of Americans don't even know that the GCD existed. So it wasn't necessarily red meat for their base, but they removed it, I believe, because they knew the power that this coalition could have in preventing their agenda from moving forward as much as they would like it to.
The GCD, again, that's the Geneva Consensus Declaration on Women's Health, which excludes a statement that abortion is part of women's health. Did other nations withdraw after Team Biden came in and began to push the radical agenda of the left again?
Not another nation has withdrawn. In fact, despite the Biden administration's pro-abortion agenda, we've actually seen two more countries added to the rolls of the Geneva Consensus Declaration, Guatemala and Russia.
Well, excellent for them because they both respect women's health and they understand that there's a continuum of life. Valerie, what do you think is going to happen on the Texas case, and what do you think is going to happen on Dobbins when it gets to the court?
Well, I think it's any of our guesses. Of course, I know what I hope will happen. I hope that what we stated in the Geneva Consensus Declaration on behalf of all of the world, that life is important through and precious through every stage of life, including before birth. I hope that we have some laws here in the country that protect life as much as some of the other partners that we have around the world defend it.
The Institute for Women's Health, the IWC.com, what's its objective?
Yeah, we're really very genuine in our desire to see these maladies that women are suffering from around the world that we know are curable or preventable, that women actually have the access to the health care and the treatment and the medications and the preventive care that they could and should have, were women's health not sidelined by these other debates.
Now, Valerie Huber, you have been targeted by the Southern Poverty Law Center, as have my friends at the Alliance Defending Freedom, as being an extremist, etc. All the left-wing titles that get attached to serious pro-life advocates. Does that bother you? Does it, in any way sideline you?
It doesn't bother me at all. I know that what we are doing is right. I know that in the long run, if we are successful, there will be millions of women's lives that are either saved or improved as a result of our effort. And that's enough to keep me going every single day.
I hope people visit theiwc.com. By the way, will they find a copy of the Geneva Consensus Declaration there?
They will as soon as our website is finalized. We have a very new organization. We've been working to get this up and running, and it's very, very new. But we have lots of experience behind this organization, even though the organization itself is new. So it's not up yet, but it will be very soon.
You did yeoman's work in the Trump administration on life issues. I wish you every success with the Institute for Women's Health, the IWH. Valerie Huber, nice to talk to you. Thank you for educating me on the Geneva Consensus Declaration. I missed stuff. I missed that entirely. That was happening in October. We had an election going